So, welcome back to the Prescription to Travel MD podcast, the podcast that was started to help my fellow physicians and busy professionals make the most of their time and turn everyday expenses into extraordinary adventures. I'm your host, Dr. Courtney Downes, and today I have a guest who truly embodies that philosophy. Dr. Devon Gimbel is a board certified dermatologist who traded in her derm scope to help even more people in a very meaningful way, and she's now a leading voice in the world of points and miles. You may know her as the founder of Point Me to First Class, where she teaches travel loving professionals how to leverage their expenses to earn credit card points for luxury travel. In this episode, we're going to dive into her journey from medicine to miles, making first class redemptions, the creation of her signature platform, and her thoughts on Hyatt, one of the most beloved hotel loyalty programs out there. We also get into the nuts and bolts of elite status, making smart redemptions, and her favorite tips for beginners and seasoned travelers alike. So grab a cup of coffee, get comfortable for your drive, or get ready wherever you're listening from, because this episode is packed with first class advice from someone who's helped thousands of people take their travel game to the next level. And I know it would do the same for you. Welcome to the show, Devon.
Thank you so much for having me. I so appreciate the invitation, especially so that we can talk about our shared love of points and miles and award travel. I'm so excited to be here today.
So I think you should start by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in points and miles.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you said, my name is Devon. I'm actually a double board certified physician. So, very kind of traditional background. I was that little kid who only ever wanted to be a doctor growing up. And so, took, again, a fairly traditional path. I went to undergrad, studied to go to medical school, took a little bit of a detour. Actually, I took 2 years off in between undergrad and med school. And it was specifically so that I could travel. I had a deep, deep love of traveling and wanting to explore the world. And I had this idea that once I started med school, probably wouldn't have a lot of time on my hands to be able to explore as much as I wanted. And so that was an absolutely amazing transformational experience for me. Then went into medical school, and from there on out, took again the very traditional path. I did a pathology residency, a dermatopathology fellowship. So those are the two things that I'm boarded in. Finished all my training in 2012. Joined a pretty small physician-owned private practice, pathology practice in the Chicago area, which is where I still am. And that's kind of what I thought was going to be my life. Like you work really hard to be a doctor, found this job I thought was going to be my forever job. And I was like, great, I'm just going to practice full-time derm path, until I'm 65 and retire. And that's not exactly how things played out. But how I got into points and miles is that when I came out of fellowship, I realized, for one thing, I finally had a paycheck, like an actual paycheck, right? Where I was not living, month to month like I was during my entire, residency and fellowship training. And also, I had no financial literacy. I had no financial education. And that was terrifying to me. I had been raised by a single mother. We were not very well financially resourced as a family. And no one had ever taught me anything about money growing up because we just didn't really have any money. And so I came out of all of my training. I finally had a real job, finally had a paycheck, also had multiple six figures in student loans. And I just felt like I don't know how to make decisions around money. I don't know how to kind of manage multiple financial priorities like paying down my student loans, setting myself up, for retirement. Those of us who go through medical school and training, we get a late start financially compared to our peers. And I just realized, wow, no one's going to hand this to me. No one's going to teach me this. So I better figure this out. And that's actually how I found Points and Miles, is that I went online. Again, this was around 2012. So the internet was, of course, a thing. There were tons of blogs, tons of websites, didn't really have social media the way that it exists today for education. And I just dove headfirst into personal finance education so that I could learn, all the things that I felt like we all should know, but no one ever taught me. And just by spending some of my break time, some of my weekend time, learning about the basics of personal finance, as happens when you search for things on the internet, you find one site, you kind of bounce into another one. And I started finding these websites where people were talking about using credit card points for travel. And I was not an immediate adopter. On the one hand, I absolutely loved travel. I loved the idea of not having to pay cash for travel. I was like, this is right up my alley, have this experience and not have to spend a ton of money for it. But as part of kind of my background, my lack of financial background, one thing that my mother had told me, and I distinctly remember this, she never really talked to me about money, about, again, financial literacy, anything. The one thing she told me when I was in high school was, never get a credit card. They are dangerous. If you get a credit card, you're going to spend more, you're going to get in debt, and you will never get out of it. And I remember thinking, that sounds horrible. Obviously, I never want to be in that position. And so I didn't have credit cards. I mean, even up into my 30s, I didn't have credit cards because I was so afraid of them. And so learning about this online, on the one hand, was really attractive to me. And on the other, I also thought, I don't know if this is for me because I don't want to get financially derailed, right? And I was very cautious about it, but I learned more, I read more. I started understanding, wow, there's a way you can do this deliberately and very, very responsibly. It doesn't have to get you into trouble. And I think it was just that possibility of just seeing, wait a minute, if it's even possible to do half of what these people are saying, to take one trip somewhere and save money. Or for me, what was really exciting is you're telling me I could potentially fly somewhere internationally, like in business class, and it'll be cheaper than paying economy. I mean, I was sold on that because I have spent hours and hours and hours of my life cramped into very uncomfortable economy seats, flying to many, many different countries. And I just thought, wow, this is worth trying. I can go at my own pace. This is worth trying. And so I got one points earning credit card, one that I would not recommend for probably anybody else in the world. We can talk about which one that is and why that is. My first card is not one I would tell anyone else to get, but it was one step for me. And I learned really slowly and cautiously. And from the very first time I used my points deliberately, it changed my life. And from that point on, so that was around, again, 2013, 2014, I have not looked back. And it has just been, at first, the most amazing hobby for me. So gratifying, so fulfilling, saved so much money. I was thrilled. Now it's what I do professionally, which to me in so many ways is even so much better, being able to share this with so many other people. And so that's kind of the long, short story about how I got into points and miles.
I love that, the route to learning more about managing your finances is what got you into this game, because I think a lot of people don't think about it that way. Oftentimes, when I mention credit cards and using points and miles, the first objection that I get is I don't want to have all of those cards. And then when you start asking, like, why you don't want to have all those cards, you find out they're kind of same story. I was told that credit cards are bad. If I use credit cards, I can end up in a lot of debt, which very well can happen. And, I've been there with credit cards during residency. And then when I was done, I was like, I'm paying off these credit cards. I'm swearing off credit cards. I'm never going to use a credit card again. I was the debit girl. So to see that you took that and, ran with it and created this wealth of information that's now available to everyone else so that they can in turn do the same thing. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, I really appreciate that so much. And I think that is so common. So many of us were raised with messages about money, and they may have been explicit messages, like the one that my mom told me, credit cards are bad, they're dangerous. And a lot of them could have been implicit messages that no one ever actually said to us, but it was almost like the lack of even talking about money, I think, has taught so many of us some really powerful things. And so I think that one of the reasons that I share that story is just to normalize it, that I think sometimes we feel like, oh man, I'm the only one who didn't know something, or I'm the only one, whose parents or caregiver never taught. And I don't think that's true. I think so many of us have these shared experiences in our backgrounds.
And so, what are some of the good benefits, the benefits of having credit cards, and how can that actually, one, increase your financial savviness in addition to being able to travel, but, some of the other benefits that come about from having lots of credit cards?
Yeah, I think there are so many potential benefits. And I think it's important to say that doesn't mean that any one person has to have whatever feels like a lot of credit cards to them. Because for some people, probably 2 credit cards feels like a lot to them. Other times for someone else, maybe 10 credit cards feels like a lot. And so I always, no matter what we're talking about, when it pertains to credit cards and points, always try to make a point of saying this is always personalized to each individual person. There's no one right way that everyone should do this. But in terms of credit cards, I think they offer so many benefits without even talking about the travel, which is, I think, one of the biggest benefits of a lot of these credit cards. I think it's just really, really nice to have a vehicle to serve as credit if you need it. And I think that's one thing that I didn't understand for a long time is that I remember thinking, okay, I don't want a credit card to put on a bunch of expenses that maybe I can't afford. But it never occurred to me the fact that credit cards can also be a form of safety in the sense that if you have a credit card, one, you're not obligated to put money on it. You're not obligated to spend up to your credit limit, every single month. But it's a nice thing to have as kind of a safety net. And I think that was especially true for me when I was still in that phase where I had not yet built up a liquid safety fund in terms of a savings account or an emergency fund or something like that. I think it is nice to be able to have something where you said, hopefully something bad doesn't happen. But if I absolutely need access to a certain amount of money and I don't have that right now, I do think credit cards can be useful for that. Again, we always want to make sure that we're using them as responsibly as we can. But I think that's important. And I also think, it's good to have financial habits where you can be intentional. And again, whether that's just one credit card or more than one credit card, I think realizing how much benefit to your credit score you can have when you understand how to use credit cards in a really deliberate way, I think that that's a big benefit.
Right. And I think having credit or building up your credit is important and being able to do other things. So if you're wanting to buy a house or invest in real estate or any of those things, having an ample amount of credit is going to be so important in being able to access opportunities that you wouldn't have if you don't have credit. So when we first finished residency, like my dad early on was very much proponent of making sure that you had good credit. And so he put us on as authorized users on his credit cards, and I didn't understand it at the time. I was just like, "Okay, well, he's putting me on as an authorized user." He made sure that when I went and bought a car, I put down a huge payment, but I also financed a portion of it so that way I could build credit even though, I was paying $100 a month, but it was more to show that, I have a good credit history. And so then when my husband, he came to here, and I think we were buying something from Target or something, and he went to go get a Target credit card, and they wouldn't give him a credit card because he had no credit history. And it was like, "Okay, well, now you have to go and do something to establish credit," or I was signed on as, like, a cosigner, and we were able to get credit because I have this longstanding credit history even though I hadn't been using credit cards for a long period of time. So, just important to be able to access things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to access. The other good point that you brought up is having that safety net. So, it's always a good idea to build up your own, like, safety fund, have your emergency fund, but I think having access to credit cards and knowing that if you do run into issue where maybe you're unemployed for a period of time or something else comes up, you have that safety net. Even if you don't use it, I think just knowing that just kinda changes the way that you go and you do life. So
Yeah, I agree with you completely.
I know there have been a lot of discussions recently about just credit card points and miles and how that can factor into your financial strategy. And I think one of the big things is being able to use it so that way you can have amount of money set aside for your travel and still be able to take part in all these things that are amazing and create this very rich experience in your life. And you can use the money that you would have put towards travel and use it to invest or, pay off your student loans, whatever it may be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was part of the experience that I had very, very early on when I was learning about points and miles. And I think that almost everybody can probably relate to being in a situation where the amount of money that you have access to from either what you make, or what you make as a household or the liquid funds that you have after you pay off your expenses. Many of us probably feel like we could easily spend more money than we actually are bringing in. And so we do have to be kind of deliberate and strategic about, okay, what are my financial priorities? Where do I want to put my funds? Where do I want to put my disposable income just so that it aligns with those priorities? And I think when I was learning about points and miles, one of the things that became really apparent to me really early on was, wait a minute, like I said, there's this background about just fundamentals of personal finance that I was learning. And I felt like it didn't matter what I was reading, who was teaching it, everyone was talking about what was very obvious to them, which was if you can, you want to make sure that you invest money. That if you have, leftover money at the end of the month, put it in a retirement account. Or, once you've exhausted those opportunities, then you can open up, a taxable account and put money there. And the whole reason is so that that money will do work for you. So that theoretically, over time, that's probably going to compound and grow, hopefully exponentially if you give it long enough time, right? So there were these personal finance concepts that I felt like were very widely adopted and made perfect sense to me about why that would be important. And what was so fascinating to me is I'm learning about credit cards kind of in tandem with the personal finance stuff. And it shocked me that nobody was talking about expenses in the same way that it seemed like everybody was comfortable talking about actual, liquid money or liquid assets. And I remember thinking, wait a minute, we're all spending money every single day, right? On the things that we need to live. And then if we have more than what we need to live, things that we also want. That's great. But every single one of us is spending money. Why is no one talking about the fact that this money that we're all going to be spending anyway, it can do so much more for us than just get us the thing we're buying, right? We all have to eat food. Some of us drive cars. We need gas to put in that car if we don't have an electric vehicle. There are things that we're spending money on. And when I saw kind of that correlation in between the way that we can use our liquid assets and put those to work and have those grow and compound for us, our expenses can do work for us too. And I think that was kind of a light bulb moment for me because, at least for my family, at the time I was married, we didn't yet have kids. We now do have two kids. my expenses have increased over time. And now that I look at them as, wait a minute, credit card points are a way for me to leverage these expenses, get something in addition to just the goods or the services I'm purchasing. And I can tap into the points and the miles that I earn from my cards, again, responsibly. I can extract so much value from those where I don't have to now decide if I've got X amount of money, do I put that into my kid's 529 plan or do I use it to travel? Because I have credit card points, I don't have to make that decision. I can put so much of my actual liquid, income after all my expenses into kind of wealth generating vehicles. And then I've got my points and miles where I don't have to spend as much cash on the travel anymore. And I think the ability of the points and miles to just dramatically expand my travel budget has been one of the most fun things about this hobby.
And I think that's probably why so many people feel like you are changing lives. I think that's a common sentiment shared among women within the Points and Miles on Facebook group. And you teach many people to be able to do these things through your course, and you also offer other services. Is that correct?
Yeah, I do. So one thing is, I think when I was learning how to do this, I was lucky because we do have the internet. We have so much access to free information. And I think that that is such a phenomenal benefit that we have. And also, I started to kind of run into what felt like a wall where a lot of the points and miles education that was available, again, at least 10 years ago, I felt like only took me up to a certain point. But there was no one talking about some of the situations that I kept encountering as a physician or as someone who had accelerated financial goals, again, because I had kind of a late start compared to my peers. My husband, who's also a physician, ended up opening up his own psychiatry practice. So then we started thinking about what does it mean as a business owner, to be thinking about expenses and credit cards. And I felt like nobody was talking about some of the scenarios that we were running into in terms of specific expenses that came up for us that I was wondering, okay, how do we still leverage these expenses? How do we maximize these to earn points? What about scenario A, B, or C? And I just wasn't seeing that anywhere on the internet. And so I just had to figure out a bunch of stuff on my own, which was fun because as many people are, we're problem solvers. It's fun to solve a puzzle. But I started to look around at my community, which is mostly, other physicians, other people who spent tons and tons of years in education. They may or may not be business owners or medical practice owners. And I started thinking, wait a minute, the people in my community, my friends, my coworkers, my colleagues, other, medical practice owners, they're in such an amazing position to earn points and miles to really take off with this hobby. We have what I consider to be a very sort of fortunate scenario where many of us are spending money. Many physicians or people, in the health profession might be spending more on average than an average American is. And I look at all those expenses, again, as just assets to leverage, assets to tap into. But I didn't feel like there was any conversation around what does points and miles look like when that is your scenario? What's different about it? What are the different decisions that we need to make about it? And that's just kind of what started my interest in teaching other people because I thought, wait a minute, I clearly knew none of this, in training. Unfortunately, there was no points and miles travel module in my residency program or my fellowship program. But I saw what a huge impact this can make on the lives, of everybody, but certainly, medical professionals as well. And it just turned into how can I teach other people who I know could benefit from this if only they knew about it? And just having those conversations about, hey, did you realize how accessible this actually is? And that part has just become so amazing for me because I've really seen other people have a similar experience to mine where once they learn just a few foundational things about this hobby, and especially once they're able to see it in action one time, just earn enough points and book one trip and have that experience, they really do feel like it makes such a positive impact on their lives. And I think that's something that I love being a part of.
Yeah. Well, I know I started out with like Points and Miles and I didn't really understand just the depth that I could go into. Probably when I found the group and I was like, oh, I can do all these like amazing things. Whereas before it was like I always talk about this, my American airline miles to book a trip to Orlando, and I look back and I'm like, that could have been my Q suites, but I went to Orlando, but or using like all my Capital One points for like points erased for a trip, which was great because I still saved money, but I had no idea just how much value those points actually had.
Yes, and I think that that is a near universal experience. I think for anybody who ends up learning a little bit more about points or miles, we all have those rites of passage about the things that we look back and say, "Oh, that's interesting. If I had known different, I would have done different then." And I have the same exact type of story. My first actual points redemption, looking back on, I think, wow, the trip itself was amazing and the experience was incredible. But the points I use, the amount I use, and how I use them, I'm like, "Oh, I could have done 20 times better," if I had known differently then. And so I think that's something that, again, almost all of us have at least one of those stories.
Yeah, and learning about being able to pay your taxes and all these things. I was 1099 for years before I ended up at my current W-2 job, and I think about all those quarterly tax payments that I could have been making, using my credit card instead of paying cash, and, you just pay them off, and how many trips I could have taken. But we don't cry over spilled points. We just do better and teach other people to make wonderful redemptions, going forward.
Yeah, 100%.
And so tell us about one of the courses that you have now.
Oh, absolutely. So I have a course called Points Made Easy. It's an online course. It's a 3-month course, and it is really built to make it easy for someone to learn what are the basics about getting myself set up with the right credit cards for me to earn as many points as I can for the things I'm already spending money on, because this is not about spending money that you wouldn't otherwise. And how do you understand how to use those points to book those amazing sort of wish list travel experiences and save a ton of money in the process? And it really is catered and geared towards folks who you don't have to be a doctor to benefit from it. But I think the way that I teach points and miles is specific to people who probably have higher than average spend, whether that's personal spend or if you are a business owner, you most likely are spending more money in your business than you may be for your personal expenses, or at least in addition to those. And I understand that for many people, maybe they don't want to go through the same process I did because it was fun for me to kind of pick around the internet and put all these pieces together to learn how to earn and use miles. I think there's so many people who, once they understand the potential value of points and miles, want to get into it. And also, they're busy. Maybe they have a full-time job, more than full-time job. They may have a family. They may not want to teach this to themselves. And so I really created the course to make it as easy and fast as possible for people who are sitting on a literal potential gold mine of points to be able to tap into that and know how to earn and redeem those points. Because I think personally, I love reading about things online. I love learning that stuff. And also, I actually think the only thing better than nerding out and learning about points and miles is using them to take an incredible trip. And so really that's the point I want to help people get to as quickly and as easily as possible.
Yeah, I know I've had many friends who've taken the course and have gotten like maximum value from it. So definitely something to sign up for when it's available, because I know it's not something you offer ongoing.
Yeah, no, I offer it usually once or twice a year. And the reason for that is because it's not just an online course, it does have lessons that you can access anytime you want and watch. But I also know that for so many people, there's a big difference between learning information and then actually trying to apply it to your own situation. And I really believe points and miles is a personal thing. The cards that work best for me may not be the same exact cards that work best for you. And the trips you want to take may not look like the types of trips that I want to take. And so even though it is an online course, when we run it for 3 months at a time, you have so much hands-on personalized help from me. So you have access to ask me any questions you want. We can build out your perfect credit card portfolio together. We do a lot of live workshops where I actually teach you this is step by step how you can find some of those amazing deals that you see other people booking, because I know the steps where people tend to get stuck. And I think it really requires not just great information, but really help with application to get over some of those roadblocks. And I love helping people in that really personalized way. I think that's what's going to guarantee that people are going to have the best experience for themselves and really learn how to use points and miles on an ongoing basis. And that's what I tell folks. I'm like, I hope that you work with me for 3 months so that you feel really confident earning and using points to book travel every year for the rest of your life after this. Because again, as much as fun as education is, pales in comparison to what it's like to actually take one of these flights for the first time or to take a vacation to a place that you otherwise might not have access to, if you don't want to allocate cash, liquid cash, to paying for travel.
And so if you're just getting started and maybe you don't have time for a course, but then you've got a lot of points and maybe you want to make a redemption. And I think one of the easiest redemptions to make is starting with hotel redemptions. I think they're a lot easier than trying to make flight redemptions, which is fortunate for a lot of people who are just getting started. And one of the easier hotel redemptions to make is booking through Hyatt. And I think we both share a love of Hyatt and some of the amazing things that are offered available through their program. So tell us a little bit about your opinion on the World of Hyatt program.
Yes, I'm a complete Hyatt fangirl. So I'm in love with this program. I think that it can benefit so many different people. And also, I didn't start out caring about hotels at all. And I think this is something that a lot of people experience, is that especially if they're in points and miles for a number of years, they may realize that as their life changes or their priorities change, maybe the way that they want to use points and miles are going to change with them. And so when I first learned about how to do this, Did not yet have kids. I was doing a lot of solo travel. And for me, points and miles, what I really wanted were amazing international flights. That's where almost all of our points and miles went. And that was great. And I never really cared about hotels. As I mentioned, I traveled for 2 years between undergrad and med school. And it was the type of travel that was, to call it shoestring, I think is an overstatement. I mean, this was like the shoestringiest of all shoestring budgets. I mean, I would do things like, take overnight buses around Asia because then I wouldn't also have to find a place to stay. If you take an overnight bus somewhere, you can kind of sleep on the bus and, be relatively functional the next day because you're young and your body still works really well. I mean, I would stay, in just the cheapest places I could find. For me, hotels, especially solo traveling, was just kind of like, as long as it's a place to stay, I have access to somewhere to, shower and clean up, that's fine. So when I first learned about points and miles, I didn't pay any attention to the hotel redemptions, but things changed for me a lot once I had 2 kids. Because I remember the very first trip my husband and I took with our son, he's the oldest of our kids, when he was probably 5 months old. We took him to Mexico. We didn't know any better. So we had all the stuff, right? All the bottles, all the formula, all the diapers, just all of the stuff. And we stayed in, regular 200 square foot hotel room because it's like, this is fine. No big deal. And I realized the very first night staying with a 5-month-old infant who clearly was still waking up multiple times a night, still took naps all day long. This was a horrific experience. I remember telling my husband, I never want to do this again. I never want to travel again, with a child if this is what traveling is like, where, it's 2 p.m. and your baby needs to sleep. So you got to turn off all the lights in the hotel room, get it pitch black, be as quiet as you can. You're waking up, both of you waking up all night with him. And it was after that that I thought, okay, I need to learn more about using my points for hotel stays because this now seems to matter a lot more to me.
Yeah, that sounds like not a vacation.
No, no, no. I mean, it was horrific. It was so awful. I mean, you look at each other and you say, gosh, we should have just stayed home. Like this is just parenting in a different place. This is much harder because you don't have any of your house stuff with you. And I think one of the things that we realize too is this will be a personal preference. Again, not everybody's going to have the same exact experience as me. But one of the things about us is that when we now have 2 children, we never shared a room with either of our kids. Even when they were infants, they had their own rooms. So we've never done the thing where we had a kid sleep in the same room as us. They always slept in separate bedrooms from each other. And so for us, the whole family staying in one small standard hotel room was a disaster, right? My kids, because for them, they'd never shared a room before. They will keep each other up all night. They will keep both of us up all night, and it's awful. And one of the reasons that I really started looking into Hyatt is because there are a couple of different major hotel chains that you can access with credit card points. So it's certainly not the only one. But one of the things that I think makes Hyatt really special and that I think was a perfect match for my family and why I became so interested in that program and I've been so loyal to it now for the last 6 years really is because if you have ever, as an adult, tried to look at the prices of hotel rooms where you have a proper 1-bedroom hotel. So they're usually called suites, but you've got a bedroom with a door that separates it from like a living room type area. Those are outrageously expensive. Like, I don't even care where you're looking in terms of destination, how nice you think that hotel is. Anytime you start looking at a proper, 1-bedroom room for hotel, I mean, just in my opinion, obscenely expensive rates, things that I personally never felt like, wow, I could justify spending that money. And also, that's what I really want if I'm going to be traveling with my children. And Hyatt is fantastic because they are the one major hotel program where at certain properties, if they have a suite available to book, you can certainly book it using cash if it's available. But oftentimes they will also make suites available to just book outright using points. And that to me was amazing, where I could book us, my whole family, straight into a proper 1-bedroom suite. And the amazing thing about a lot of hotel redemptions is that when you use points to book them, you have no out-of-pocket cash cost for the reservation itself. So if you have enough points, you can book that suite, again, outright, no additional cash cost to it. And that one thing truly changed my family's experience when we travel. And I think it's why we've traveled as a family as much as we have, because it's just made it so much more comfortable and so much more possible. And there are none of the other major hotel chains who make it as easy to book a suite or to travel with a family, in my opinion, as Hyatt does. And it's just one of many reasons why I'm in love with the program.
Yeah, because you'll definitely spend like at least 5 times like the normal room rate just to get a suite in the off season. Trying to do something like that during peak times, spring break or summer travel, as I've found myself. can be pretty costly. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of those things too that really changed about the way I travel. When I travel solo, I have a lot more flexibility. I don't have to travel around usually certain specific dates. Again, for one person, you tend to have a lot more options available. When we travel with our kids, we're trying to minimize the amount of time that they're pulled out of school. So we're traveling their spring break when every other school in the area is also on spring break. We're traveling their winter break when every school in the country seems to be on winter break. And, those can be times where prices for flights, prices for hotels just skyrocket. And points have really allowed us to be able to travel during those times, again, without just hemorrhaging money. And on top of it, just having some amazing options for places to go and places to stay. And I think that that has such a huge impact for people who are traveling with families because a lot of us are constrained, by traditional school schedules.
and I think just having the options for, like, nicer hotel stays. I was just with a friend, and we were reminiscing on when we went to Costa Rica, maybe probably 15, 20 years ago, and we were there, we stayed at the Jungle Garden, and I think it probably cost us, like, 25 bucks a night or something, sleeping under the mosquito net, and she took this picture of me because I'm terrified of, like, bugs and insects and anything, and there were, like, geckos crawling on the wall, and she's from a place where that wasn't an issue for her, so she's just like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm making sure that I'm protected from anything that's crawling around, this $25 room we just booked here because that's what we can afford, on our med school salary," which was nonexistent. So it's nice to be able to go to places that are, a little bit nicer and not, have to spend an arm and a leg to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what I found too is that what we're not having to spend as a family, again, on our flights or hotel or a combination of both, what that means is then we can take whatever our travel budget is anyway and then do the types of experiences that are going to make that travel either more comfortable for us as a family or just more entertaining, right? Or more enriching. And I think that's an amazing option to have where when you're not depleting your entire travel budget on the flight and the hotel, because those are traditionally very, very high cost items when you're paying very, very little for those, all of a sudden you get to say, "Oh, wow, how do we then actually wanna use our travel budget for experiences in our destination?" I think that's one of the most fun parts about it.
Yeah. And so what's some of your favorite redemptions so far?
Oh my gosh, I've had so many redemptions. So to put this into context, I've been doing this for over 10 years. I'm obviously very enthusiastic about it. So I maybe am not, just sort of like the very typical points and miles user. I've learned a lot about these programs over time, but I think for so many people, this is true for me, that first intentional points redemption is such a memorable one. And even though I've had, I mean, truly so many amazing experiences I never, ever, ever would have if I didn't know about points and miles, I think my first points redemption still stands out as such a memorable one because of, I mean, so many things. How much money I didn't have to spend on travel, the experience itself, how different it was from all the other experiences I'd ever have traveling. And I'll tell you what it was and why this was such a big deal to me personally. So there are tons of ways that you can use points and miles again for flights, for hotel stays. And this was for me back in probably 2014, my first on purpose points redemption, not the mistake ones and the bad ones I had made, up until then because I didn't really know there were other ways to use points and miles. But I had my eye on this very specific redemption because it was one that so many points bloggers had talked about. And I thought, I really want to try that. So I'm based in the Chicago area. I had a melanoma conference that I was attending in Paris. So I had to get myself from Chicago to Paris. And ordinarily, up until that point, my approach would have been what is the absolute cheapest cash flight in economy that I can find for this trip? And because I had points and miles, I realized, wow, I can actually try something different. I can, for the first time in my life, try to fly, international long haul flight, not on the most basic of basic economy. And I booked Lufthansa First Class. And so for people who haven't flown a lot internationally or not, aviation geeks or anything like that, you probably may not know just because domestic airplanes are not structured the same way. But international airlines, some of them have multiple classes of service where there's, regular economy, maybe premium economy, business class, which is what a lot of us walk through. You pass through that when you're trying to get back to your economy seat. Those are the seats that just look amazing. They're lie flat. They're so much bigger than the economy seats. But some airlines internationally also have a first class cabin, which is a higher class of service than even business class. They tend to have maybe 4 to 8 seats total, so even bigger seats than what you see in lie flat business class, different level of service. And I had flown from Chicago to Frankfurt on Lufthansa First Class, and it literally changed my experience of travel. I never, ever, ever thought I would ever be flying anything other than economy, just based on the way I grew up, based on the fact that Even if I had technically the amount of money in my bank account that it would cost to book that flight, there's just so many other things, that I wanted to put my money towards that I just would never have paid cash for that. And it was such an extraordinary experience, and the fact that the only way it was possible for me was because of points and miles, and it was so few points and miles, again, from what you would think it would cost, it just blew my mind, and literally on that flight, I remember thinking, "I am never, ever, ever gonna fly long-haul economy ever again. I will do whatever it takes, to figure out how do I keep doing this internationally." And honestly, for the most part, when I've flown, international long haul flights, so for me, that's anywhere that's going to take maybe longer than 7 or 8 hours, to get to. I want to fly lie flat or I don't want to go. And Points and Miles had made that possible for me. And that flight was really what started it. It proved to me this is not a scam. You can do this, again, really intentionally. And this can just change so much of your experience of travel. And I think the out of pocket cash cost for that flight, it was less than $50. And I could not believe that. I could not believe, wait a minute. I would have spent, whatever basic economy in 2014 was going to cost from Chicago to Paris. I can guarantee you would have been a couple $100 at least. But to fly first class for less than $50, I was sold. I was like, I can't believe this is real, but if it is real, I'm going to take advantage of it as long as I can.
Yeah, man, I'm, like, totally geeked out by, like, all of, like, your trips, and I've been eyeing Lufthansa First Class and trying to figure out how I'm going to make it happen in the next few weeks and waiting for them to release some, like, last-minute award availability.
It's worth waiting for it, and it's worth grabbing it if you can find it because it is just such, I think, a classic points and miles experience to have, and it's just amazing.
So, that was your first intentional flight experience. How about hotels?
Oh my gosh, hotel. So, like I mentioned, I'm a huge Hyatt fangirl. So, I've been very loyal to Hyatt ever since really 2020. So, even though it was the pandemic and people were not actually traveling and staying in hotels, many of the major hotel chains during the pandemic kind of changed their rules for how easy or hard it was to actually achieve status because nobody was staying in hotels. Nobody could. And so, all these hotels had these kind of pandemic promotions where they made it very, very easy to earn status. And I wanted to try the top tier of status in Hyatt, which is called Globalist. I thought, let me try to qualify for this. Let me see if it's really everything everyone is saying it is. And so I qualified for Globalist status. And then once the world opened back up, we could start traveling again, starting around the end of, for us, we didn't really start traveling again until 2022 because of the ages that our kids were. And, we wanted to make sure to wait until vaccines were available for adults and kids. Finally, in 2022, we really started traveling again and we started staying in Hyatt properties. And I realized that everyone is saying about Hyatt Globalist status is true. It's even better, in real life. And I think one of the things that we have loved so much about Hyatt stays, we've stayed in them all over the place. There's an amazing Hyatt property in the Cancun area called the Andaz Mayakoba. They're actually renovating it right now. They're going to rebrand it as an even sort of nicer version of Hyatt. So I'm excited to go back and try that. We've stayed at Grand Hyatts in Hawaii. We've stayed at Park Hyatts. It's one of my favorite brands. We take our kids on staycations downtown Chicago to the Park Hyatt Chicago and then make it a weekend with like museums and aquarium and stuff. We've stayed at the Park Hyatt in St. Kitts, and every single one of those Hyatt stays has just been fantastic. Number one, because we use points to book those rooms outright. So our actual hotel reservation costs us $0, which is my favorite kind of expense to pay for a hotel room. But then what we get from the benefits of having status in the program, again, I don't think it's going to make sense for every single person, but for us, because we really do enjoy Hyatt properties and we travel as a family of four, we save so much money with our globalist status and we get really, really incredible benefits in return for that. So things like a free breakfast for a family of four. I am one of those people where I will happily spend X amount of money on a flight or X amount of money on an experience. I don't like spending money on food. I think I have, like, money trauma around the food spending that I just get very worked up about it. And so for me, especially with kids, where it's like, you got a kid who says they want pancakes, you order the $21 pancakes, and then they decide they don't want it anymore. Oh my gosh, I just cannot deal with that. So luckily, I don't have to. And we get free breakfast from our status. And that can save us, again, depending on the property we're staying at, because so many hotels, they just up cost their food so much. Breakfast for a family of four can cost $250. I don't want to spend that, so we get to save that every single day. That's incredible to me. So I think there's so many amazing Hyatt redemptions that are out there, whether you're traveling solo or you have a family. My other favorite one I recommend to every single person, especially if you're someone who identifies as a woman. Maybe you're taking care of everybody else in your life. Maybe you don't feel like you have an opportunity to take care of yourself. Use your Chase points, that's one of the credit card types of points, and book yourself a stay at a Miraval property and thank us later. It is an absolutely amazing all-inclusive spa type of property. There's 3 of them in the United States. Again, if you have points, you will pay $0 out of pocket for your actual stay. I think staying at Miraval, especially going there by myself or with a girlfriend, such an amazing use of points. It will save you so much money, but even more importantly, it will allow you to take care of yourself in a way that you might not be able to do on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think the Miraval was one of my first intentional point redemptions, and I realized I could I flew to Tucson, which was an hour flight from here for less than $100. I stayed there for $0 because I booked it all on points, and they give you the credit for, like, massages and all their, like, extra classes, and it was just an amazing redemption, so which one is your favorite?
Okay, so there's 3 that are based in this country. There's a new one that's gonna be opening up on the Red Sea. It's not open yet, so unfortunately, I don't have any good information about that one, but the ones that are in the United States, there's one in the Berkshires in Massachusetts. I have not visited that one. The other 2, one is based in Austin and one is based in Tucson or right outside of Tucson in Arizona. So the Arizona location, the Austin location, both absolutely fantastic. I think they're amazing in different ways, and so it kinda depends on what you're looking for. I think especially if you're really sensitive to environment, if you really know you love a desert environment, I mean, the Miraval in Arizona is just so stunning, so beautiful because of its setting. I love the Austin location because it's very easy for me to get to directly from Chicago. It's not a really, really long travel day. I love the Austin kind of area in general. But they're both incredible, and I think if you can't decide which one to go to and you have enough points, try them both. I don't think that you will be disappointed.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to trying the Austin location. So I've used my points for the first trip, but I also like using like CME as a means to being able to travel just because it's reimbursed through my employer. I can use my credit card and get the points for it, and they're going to pay me back to go and take this amazing vacation. And I know a lot of people have upcoming trips or CME trips that are available in both the Tucson and the Austin location. So good way to spend your points, but also good way to spend your CME dollars if you can find a conference there.
Yeah, absolutely. I would do that in a heartbeat if I had that option.
Yeah, and so Miraval and Park Hyatt and Grand Hyatt are all amazing places that you can visit, and even more amazing if you have Globalist status. Can you tell us a little bit more about Globalist status? Because I know people who are listening are like, "What does that even mean, and how do I get that?" And.
Yeah, absolutely. So, pretty much every single major hotel chain will have some sort of loyalty program. And the whole point of that is, they want to reward people for choosing to stay at their hotel versus staying at another one. And so, whether it's Marriott or Hilton or Hyatt or IHG, they'll have a loyalty program and they say, okay, if you stay, X amount of nights in our property or you spend X amount of money on a hotel credit card, in exchange, we're going to give you different benchmarks as you reach status. And at each level of status, most of these hotel programs have 3 to 5 levels of status. Then, as the consumer, you get better and better benefits the higher level of status you have. And so, for people who either travel frequently, or again, if you're someone who's spending a certain amount of money for your personal expenses a year, if you're a business owner, you have business expenses and you want to allocate those expenses to a hotel specific credit card, can be a really easy way to start earning status in these different programs. Hyatt is really interesting in that their top tier, their highest level of status is called Globalist status. And unlike some other hotel programs, they do not right now have an option where you can get that top level of hotel status just by holding a certain credit card. So, for instance, Marriott and Hilton, they both have premium, meaning high annual fee credit cards where if you just sign up for one of these high annual fee credit cards, one of the benefits of the credit card is you automatically get top tier status in the Hyatt program or the Marriott program. For some people, that's amazing. It's a very easy way to get a high level of status because you're not required to stay in those properties, a certain number of nights a year. So Hyatt doesn't offer that. So I think some people see that as a drawback, but I see it as a benefit because it means that there are fewer people who then qualify for globalist status. And so if you do make it to that level, you have a lot more benefits that are available for you. And it wasn't just a matter of, someone having access to it with a credit card.
A lot less competition.
Yes, exactly. And I think when it comes to then getting those benefits, that's really, really nice. And so for Hyatt, they have a rule, or the standard way that you have to qualify for status is they say, okay, you can do this in one of two ways. You can either stay in Hyatt properties 60 nights over a calendar year. So this is, you're actually making a hotel stay. You're going to one of these properties, you're staying there 60 nights within a calendar year. They also say, okay, they have this thing called base points, which is basically going to benefit someone if you're spending a high amount of cash for hotel stays in their properties. If you earn 100,000 base points, you can also get Globalist. Most of us are not going to qualify through that base point route because it means that we're actually spending around $20,000 a year in Hyatt properties. So maybe you only stay 4 nights, but you hosted a wedding, or you hosted another big event where you spent 20K, then you'd get there. But I don't think a lot of us are doing that. Most of us are saying, no, I want to save money. I don't want to spend the money at these hotels. And so we're going to go the route of needing to qualify for Globalist status based on 60 nights of stay. But even for people who don't stay in hotels 60 nights a year, I don't stay in hotels 60 nights a year, and travel is what I consider to be my profession. So I know if I'm not doing it, most other people are not doing it either. But Hyatt still allows you an alternate way to hit 60 nights. So it can be just 60 nights staying in their hotel, or it can be a combination of nights stayed and then money spent on a Hyatt specific credit card. And I think for a lot of folks, they use a combination of actual nights stayed and then nights earned from credit card spend to hit that 60 qualifying night threshold in order to qualify for Globalist status. And I think this is an area where, again, especially for folks who have the luxury of having high expenses, it makes it much more accessible to say, okay, I'm going to allocate X% of the money I spend a year onto my Hyatt credit card so that I know I can reach Globalist status without having to stay 60 nights per year. Now, if you're staying 0 nights per year, I'm not sure it's worth it to spend the entire way to status because then you're not really getting the benefit. Like what's the point if you're not actually also staying in Hyatts? But I think there's a lot of people who probably stay in Hyatt properties, 15 to 35 nights a year, and then they use credit card spend to make up that difference. And it's still worth it to them because of how much value they derive, from holding that status for the year that they have it.
So I guess what's the minimum number of nights that you could stay and still earn status?
I mean, technically, you can stay 0 actual nights in a Hyatt, and if you have the World of Hyatt business credit card, if you put $120,000 of spend on that card in a calendar year, that alone will qualify you for Globalist. So again, if you're a business and you have expenses to run your business, or if you're paying something like your quarterly taxes on a credit card, and if those will get you, over the 120K mark, you can qualify just on money spent alone. But that's the type of person where I wonder how much value you're going to get from status if you don't really stay in this hotel. So I think there is kind of that sweet spot where you realize, okay, I don't need to stay in Hyatt properties 60 nights a year in terms of getting, a lot of benefit from my Globalist status. But I think for the most part, depending on the types of properties that you like to stay at, even if you're staying in Hyatt properties, again, 15 to 20 nights a year, having the status can be worth it at that level.
And other cards that you'd recommend to work on getting status?
Yes. So if you want to get status specifically with Hyatt, you're going to have 2 options, and you can hold both of these cards. So Chase is the credit card issuer that issues the World of Hyatt co-branded. All that means is hotel specific credit card. So there's one World of Hyatt personal card and there's one World of Hyatt business card. So as an individual person, you can have both of those cards. But if you are wanting to allocate spend onto your credit card specifically so that you can earn your way towards status, I think the World of Hyatt business card is a better fit because it earns those qualifying nights towards status at a faster rate than the personal card does. And so it would make sense to hold both cards if you're a business owner and you want to separate business from personal expenses. But if you're going to be allocating a lot of spend to a card in order to earn status, the business card is the one I would start with.
Okay, so start with the business card and then you can get both the business and the personal card. You can use both of them to earn status?
Yes, you can. It's just that you're going to have to put more, like a higher overall amount of spend on the personal card to reach the same level of status. And so that's why if you know you have a good amount of expenses and you want to use those, it makes sense to get the business card for that. But again, if you have personal spend and business expend, I don't recommend that you mix the two on, either a personal or a business card. It's good to keep those completely separate. So for instance, I'm a business owner. I have business spend that I put on my World of Hyatt business card when I know I want to earn a certain amount of nights towards status. And then when I'm traveling with my family for our vacations, if we're staying at a Hyatt, maybe we'll have some incidental costs from our stay where, you go to the coffee shop in the hotel, or maybe you book an activity or something through the hotel. I'll pay for anything related to our personal travel on our personal World of Hyatt card to keep it totally separate, from the expenses that we have from my business that I put on my business card.
Sure. Thoughts on processes to fast track to globalist status?
So there are a couple of different options. Again, sort of the standard way that you're going to reach it is through 60 qualifying nights, which can either be those nights stayed in a hotel or a combination of nights stayed and then spend put on a credit card. Every once in a while, Hyatt will also have kind of promotional status. They call them challenges, where for a certain period of time, if you sign up for a challenge, you can earn certain levels of status, including the top tier globalist status, but it's going to require a lot less than it normally does. And so those promotions or those challenges change over time. But if you're really interested, at least in achieving that top tier of status, so you can try it out to see if it's worth it for you to continue trying to get it year after year. Keep your eyes open for one of these status challenges. Oftentimes, it'll look like something like instead of having to stay 60 nights at Hyatt hotels over the course of a year, maybe you need to stay 20 nights over the course of 3 months. But once you've done that, then you hit globalist status. So that's one way if you're actually trying to get status yourself. Kind of the backdoor way where you're not going to earn status, but you may be able to enjoy the benefits of status is that one of the things that Hyatt does really, really well is when someone does get globalist status, they have access to a lot of benefits or perks that they can actually gift someone else. And so I think it's worth asking around to some of your friends and family members, finding out, do you know anyone who actually already has qualified for globalist status? Because they may be able to gift you certain perks or benefits so that then you get to experience those perks, things like suite awards, where they can gift you an award where you can then outright book a suite for yourself or for your family, again, without having to use the points or cash to do that. Lounge access awards. So some Hyatts have a lounge in the hotel where you have to have lounge access to get in there, but then there's, food and drinks that you can have for free. A lot of globalists will be able to send their friends or send their families some of these awards where then the friend or family member can use it. And so I would say if you're not quite yet sold that it's worth it for you to try to go and get status for yourself, find a family or a loved one or a friend who has it and just ask, "Hey, would you be willing, to share one of your awards with me?" So many of us who have those, we love sharing them with our friends and family because we automatically get the benefits of them because of our status, so we don't need them for ourselves. And a lot of us love spoiling the people in our lives and letting them have that experience as well. So I think that's a good way where you can test it out with a very, very low level of commitment in terms of, spending money or staying a certain number of nights in a Hyatt property.
Yes, yes. And I was a recipient of one of your gracious awards when we went to Costa Rica, and we had 2 rooms that were booked. And so we were able to get breakfast for, all of my family that was there with us, which made like such a big difference. And there was one of the breakfast places that was only open to globalists. We were able to have access to that by being gifted a globalist award. And so I'm currently in the process of doing one of the corporate challenges because I was trying to figure out like, how do I get to globalist status? Um, and then Chase was being a little, they didn't want to extend any more credit to me at this time. So I'm trying to slow down a little bit. I'm not at 524, but I think I've, with all the inks and all the other things that I've been doing with Chase, I figured I'd give them a little breather. And I'm also waiting for one of their other cards to come out. So, but World of Hyatt card was initially on my list of cards to get so that way I could get status. So we'll see. We have a few Hyatt stays that are coming up. And so I was like, well, this is a good time, better time than any to give it a try and reap some of those rewards. So
Absolutely. I hope you get there because it's really, really great to have status.
yeah, I'm like free parking alone is like worth it to, have like globalist status. So
Yeah, you can save so much money from the benefits. I mean, I think that's one thing that people don't always realize, or maybe they do now. All of these programs, I think airlines are doing this, hotels are doing this, where you pay for, what you think is supposed to be an inclusive experience. And then there's all these extra things that are tacked on, all these extra fees. And it's so frustrating. And so to be able to stay again at a hotel and have something like resort fees just waived because you have status, that adds up, especially if you're looking at a week-long trip, for yourself or for your family. And so I really think that looking at hotel status, again, maybe not going to be right for every single person, but I think it's worth kind of looking into to say, hey, if there is a hotel chain that I find myself staying at, what would it take for me to qualify for status? Because the benefits can be just huge cash savers and just really improve your experience as well.
Right, and you went to the Maldives recently, and you were able to use your Globalist status to get free breakfast, and I'm sure it helped to waive some of the other fees that were associated with that.
I think that that is such a great example. There are a lot of trips I've taken that I've thought, okay, if I did not have points and miles, would I still take this trip? And I think the answer would be yes, but it would look very different. I may still take a trip, but I would be flying economy. Totally fine. Yes, I would still take this trip, but I would probably be staying in an Airbnb and not in a hotel because I would be really, conscious of keeping my cost much lower. The one trip that my family has taken that I honestly do not think we would have done at all if we did not have points and miles was we took our kids to the Maldives for winter break. I mean, it's absurd. It's completely absurd that this is even, a possibility, but we flew there on points. We stayed at the Park Hyatt Maldives using points, and it was such an incredible value. The rooms there, this is my type of property. I'm not a mega resort type of person. I love small, very quiet, very boring places. And I say that in a very, loving way.
Very boring.
Yeah, very boring. I'm like, "Please don't no one make a sound. I don't want anything to happen. I don't want any noise." And the Park Hyatt Maldives, I mean, aside from the fact that it's in the Maldives, which is just stunningly beautiful, it's a tiny property. You can walk around this entire island in about 10 minutes. There's golf carts for the staff, but there are no vehicles on this island. There's 50 individual villas, and that's it. And we could use points to book ourselves into a villa, fit our family of 4. It was absolutely incredible because we're globalists and they actually had capacity when we checked in. They upgraded us, which is, again, not necessarily guaranteed, but when they do have upgraded rooms available, then they will move a globalist into that. And for us, that meant that we had a private plunge pool. So we have a villa on the beach on this island, a private pool, which if you ask my kids, like there's absolutely nothing better in the world than having, a private little plunge pool. We had free breakfast every single day, again, especially in a place like the Maldives where they have to fly in and bring in every single thing that gets eaten on that island. Food costs are notoriously incredibly high. So to feed a family of 4 for free for breakfast, I mean, that was just an enormous cost savings. They also had every day, I think it was from around 5 to 7 p.m., a happy hour for globalists at their poolside bar, which was a couple of different hors d'oeuvres and then a free beverage. They had a great non-alcoholic beverage list. And for us, for our kids, where, my kids go to bed between 7 and 8 p.m., especially with the jet lag, we weren't staying up until 8 or 9 p.m. to take them, to one of the restaurants on the island to eat. We could eat the globalist happy hour, hors d'oeuvres, everybody get a juice. My kids were happy. I mean, we saved so much money. And it's ridiculous when I tell people, we took our kids to the Maldives for 10 days and our actual hotel cost, what they were, it's cheaper, honestly, than when we took our kids to San Diego for a week because, our globalist status and points just offset that cost so much. And I think that's the thing that's so unbelievable is that it's not just about getting, again, maybe one weekend night offset, in terms of what points can do for you. I mean, they can really do some extraordinary things.
And I love that you're saying all of these things because I think it can be really like mind blowing for people to hear this. And I think a lot of times when I'm talking to people, they probably think it's like some type of scam, that there's no way you could really be doing this. But I'm like, yeah, like people really do these things, And whether you have like high expenses, you've got a business expenses that are helping you accumulate points, or you don't have any of those things and you're just, the average Joe and you're just working a job and making your utility payments and you're paying your rent and, doing all these things. So I love that you're doing all these amazing things. You're showing what's possible for someone who wants to travel with their kids. You're showing what's possible for women who want to get out there and travel and you want to, be sitting in first class, business class seats. I love that you're making all this possible for so many. So
Thank you. I appreciate it so much. Like I said, points and miles changed my life. And I looked around and I just thought so many other people are in exactly the same position to take advantage of this, especially women. I want women to enjoy the way they travel. I want them to be able to fly business class, first class if they want to. I want it to be so normal to see a family sitting on a long haul business class flight. I want people to be able to have these experiences for themselves and for their families. And I think it's a very real thing that we might not have the disposable cash to do this all the time. I think that that is a reality for so many of us. And just to know, wait a minute, here's an alternate pathway. Like I said, I still spend money on travel, but my travel budget has been expanded like 10x because of points. And I always like to ask people, no, really, what would you do if your travel budget was 5 times what it actually is? Whether your annual travel budget is $1,000 or $5,000 or something different. If you had 5 times that or 10 times that, what would you do differently? Because it is extraordinary the difference that that can make.
Yeah, wow. And you're helping people do that through your course, and you're helping businesses and small business owners be able to maximize their expenses so that way they can expand their travel budget and expand their experiences and just keep creating these memory dividends of, being able to travel with their friends and their family and their loved ones. And I just love all that about you. And I love the community that you've created, that I've been fortunate enough to be a part of. And I'm sure, again, many of the people who are listening are also a part of it, and if they're not a part of it, I'm sure they'll be jumping on the bandwagon soon.
I really, really appreciate that. I mean, more than anything, I just want folks who love to travel and think that they're constrained by their budget to understand that this is a potential solution to that. And I really encourage you just dive in, learn as much as you possibly can at your own pace. Because again, there's just so many potential amazing uses of points and miles. I've seen them change the lives of so many people. And anything I can do to kind of increase, awareness about that, I'm going to try to do because I really think everybody deserves this.
Yeah. Well, before I let you go, I do have to ask, because I'm sure you probably have accumulated quite a few cards over this journey. If there are 2 cards, you can only keep 2 cards in your wallet, which cards would you keep?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Thank God that this is just, a hypothetical question. Only two. I can only keep 2 cards. Oh my gosh. I feel like I'm sweating. I'm having palpitations here. Okay. So I will tell you, I would keep one Chase card and one Amex card, first of all, because those are two of the main transferable points currencies. I think it's so important to have at least one transferable points currency in terms of the options that it gives you. I love the options I have between Chase and Amex. So if I could only have one Chase card, I would have said up until recently, probably the Chase Sapphire Reserve. I've had that card since 2016. I love it. Chase just made me very angry with some rumors that they're going to drastically increase the annual fee on that card. And if they do, I'm getting rid of it, but I would get the Chase Sapphire Preferred instead. So I would say one of the Chase Sapphire cards, I think absolutely I would keep that. And then on the Amex side, this one's really tough because I think for most people, an Amex personal gold card, absolutely amazing. You will have to rip that one out of my hands. I think it's such a good card. But for me, if I could only keep two, I would keep an Amex Business Platinum only because my husband and I are both small business owners and our business expenses vastly outpace our personal expenses. And we use the Amex Business Platinum card for so many business expenses that I would have to hold on to that one if those are the only two. But if that actually happened, I would be devastated. I would be devastated because there's so many great cards that I use on a regular basis. So I'm just really happy that I don't have to make this decision in real life.
Well, that's interesting. I'm an Amex Personal Gold fan myself. I was an Amex Personal Pop-Up Gel for, like, forever. I haven't tried since then, but they wouldn't give me a card, or they would give me the card, but they wouldn't give me the sub. So, my husband has one, so we pretty much just use his. But yeah, the Amex Personal Gold. And then the Amex Platinum card, the Business Platinum card, um, I'm a little iffy about, probably because I don't have a lot of business expenses.
Yeah, and I think this is such a good example that there is no one right card. There's cards that are great for certain uses. I think about it like clothing. Like I grew up in Southern California. I didn't need a lot of diversified clothing. I went to medical school in Cleveland. And I remember that first winter just being like, "Oh my word, what is happening? How do I get warm? This does not make sense to me." And now I live outside of Chicago. And so if I was still living in California, I wouldn't care about having snow boots and a huge winter parka, right? Because it's not necessary. I think about the same things with credit cards. I think they all have really interesting and particular uses. And what the best thing you can do for yourself is know which one of these cards is going to benefit me, right? Based on, again, the type of spend I have or the priorities I have for travel. So I think it's amazing that you've identified, oh, an Amex Business Platinum for you. Maybe that's going to be way down on your list, but for me, because of the way that I use the card, I'm like, oh my gosh, don't take this one away from me.
I'm still holding on to it. I've got the business platinum. I don't have the personal platinum. Again, me and my husband kind of divvy up who's gonna hold which card just based on, having the high annual fees and, how much benefit we're actually gonna get from it. So, but great that you pointed out that, there are different strokes for different folks. So what your personal favorite card maybe is gonna be different from mine for different reasons. But either of those cards are gonna be better than using your debit card and paying with cash.
Absolutely. If you're earning those transferable points over, a store-specific credit card, a debit card, you are on the right path. Just keep going.
You are, right, right. So, anything coming up for you in the travel world?
Oh my gosh, so much. I think context here is important. Now I run a business that's entirely focused on teaching other people how to use points and miles to travel. So I think I probably travel a lot more, especially than when I was working full time in medicine. So my life looks a little bit different from when it did then. And I also am someone, I love being on airplanes. I especially love long haul airplanes where I get to be in business class or first class. So I know some of my trips make no sense to other people, including my husband. When I tell him I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to fly to Tokyo and back in 48 hours because there's this amazing flight I want to take, he accepts it, but he doesn't understand it.
They make perfectly good sense to me. I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds like an amazing idea."
It really is, especially for me as a mother, when I get to fly on a 13-hour flight by myself and I don't have to worry about someone needing to go to the bathroom or having a snack or spilling food on them. I'm like, you cannot get anything better than that. So I do have a couple of trips coming up that are really about exploring new airline products for me. So much fun. We also have our family travel, which is equally incredible. Different places that we get to try out with our kids, and especially with that Maldives trip, which was very ambitious and to take 2 kids on. I feel like they crossed over the threshold where I now feel really comfortable taking them on long haul flights. Whereas prior to that, especially my daughter, who's 6 right now, felt like she could handle an airplane flight up until maybe 5 or 6 hours, and then she kinda started to decompensate. Now she can do better on those longer flights, and so we're taking our family for a week in August to Montenegro, which is a country none of us have been to, and that's exciting for me because I have traveled quite a bit. I like going somewhere for the first time where for all of us, it's our first time, and so I'm really looking forward to that, and then I'm really fortunate because I have a girlfriend who likes taking flights as much as I do, and so now I have someone who I can text on the spur of the moment and say, "Hey, here's this amazing flight. Let's go on a 4-day trip," and she'll say yes, and so we are trying out the brand new Japan Airlines First Class on one specific aircraft. No one else is gonna care about this. It's called the A350. We're gonna fly that from Dallas to Tokyo, spend 2 days in Tokyo together, and then we're flying home from Hong Kong to JFK on Cathay Pacific's first class. It's like a 16-hour flight, which I know for some people probably sounds like agony, but 16 hours in first class, I cannot wait for it. So I have that kind of summer trip coming up with a girlfriend and then some other things sprinkled in between, but just a lot of really fun things to look forward to.
No, I think when you're on an amazing flight, like, if it's too short, it almost feels like you're a little sad about it, you know?
Yeah, which is a wild thing to say because most of the time I think people think, "Oh my gosh, I just want this flight to end as soon as possible. I just wanna get to my destination." But that is what is so wild. When you have points and miles and you can fly some of these international business or first class flights, it's not that the point is the destination, is that the journey is part of the experience, and it is just the absolute most fun thing. I mean, stick me on an international business or first class flight for 25 hours, I will not complain. I'm so excited by it.
Yeah, yeah, no. When we flew the 16 hours to Singapore, it was amazing because you had time to actually sleep, and you can get up and enjoy all the meals, and you didn't miss a thing, you know? I think flying an amazing airline and getting maybe, like, 4 to 6 hours would be you feel maybe a little cheated?
Yeah, I've actually had a flat like that before. It was a 6-hour flight in first class, and the whole time, I was like, "I wish this was longer. I wish this was twice the amount of time to really be able to experience it all and take advantage of it." So, that's the wild thing about points and miles. You actually hope for longer and longer flights versus the shorter and shorter flights.
Yeah. Well, they sent out an alert early on, like, Thrifty Traveler for Etihad.
Oh, I saw that. I booked it.
Did you?
Yeah, of course I did.
Oh, I love it. Yay. You flew them before, didn't you?
So I have flown the first class apartment on Etihad, but when I flew them, it was about a year and a half ago. And the only routes that they were flying at that point post pandemic with that specific aircraft was in between Abu Dhabi, their base, and then London and some other European cities. They were not operating that aircraft in between any of the US airports in Abu Dhabi. And so I had built out, this was another one of my crazy. I flew like 7 flights in 5 days. And part of it was because I really wanted to fly the apartment in between London and Abu Dhabi, and it was amazing, but it was not long enough. And so literally earlier today, I saw that notification that Etihad had released a ton of first class award space from JFK and from Toronto. And I'm very close to Toronto, being in Chicago. And also, I like that that's a longer flight than the JFK to Abu Dhabi flight. Literally got, yes, this notification. I have a bunch of American Airlines miles, and so I went on to American Airlines. I booked a round trip, Toronto to Abu Dhabi, back to Toronto, first class apartment both ways. It was only, I mean, ridiculously low in points and miles world, 230,000, I think, miles for a round trip ticket, which is crazy, which incidentally, it's 20,000 fewer points and miles than I was saying, my first points redemption that I did before I knew about points and miles. My husband and I spent 250,000 Chase points to fly round trip economy on Iberia Airlines from Chicago to Morocco. So I'm thinking, okay, we spent 250,000 Chase points to fly two people round trip economy, and I used fewer points and miles to book round trip first class on Etihad. This is the difference about points and miles when you learn just a few things. I am so excited. And I'll have 2 days on the ground in Abu Dhabi. Man, I'll have so much time to explore.
Yeah, well, I'm excited for you. I'm like, even when I was looking at him, like, I have no reason to go to Abu Dhabi, but I was like, maybe I can just go. Maybe I can just, take a flight and just go. So
Yep, that's my reason.
yeah, like I was like sitting on the edge of my seat last time when you took that flight and we were able to, watch things through like Instagram. And you don't post often, but when you do, it's always good.
I appreciate that. You can travel. I love traveling vicariously through other people when I know someone is gonna go somewhere. When you went to Singapore, I was following you the whole time and show me every single thing about Singapore. I can't get enough. So I think it's really, really fun to be able to travel vicariously through other people and see what do these different airlines look like and what neighborhoods did you explore in this different place? I think, those of us who love travel will get it anyway. It comes.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's exciting to watch people travel. Sometimes it's even more exciting to watch them make these redemptions and like, man, like you wish you could have booked that, and when you see someone else, book it, and you're like kinda cheering them on, like going, "Hey, somebody else got that flight, and I get to be a part of it."
100%. I'm always thrilled for people when they're able to jump on a great deal or they're able to book something, that they've been working really, really hard and long to be able to earn the points for and do the research about how to book it. It's always something that I think is just so much fun, so worth celebrating.
I feel like your adrenaline has to be, like, high all the time because everyone's always like, "Devin, Devin, look what I did," just to see, like, all the amazing things that the people are doing, and again, I know you probably hear this all the time, but it's, because of you, putting this group out there, and even if it's not you directly, it's, this community that you've built of women, physicians who are out there, and even people who aren't women physicians have benefited from it, but, like, specifically within that group because there's so much camaraderie within the group and you go to other, like, Points and Miles group and you don't get, like, the same like, everybody's always willing to help and everyone's always willing to, extend their expertise, and you don't get that from, like, the other communities, so, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for building such a special place for us to all, create these memories with our families.
You are so welcome. Thank you for being a part of it. Thank you for everything you do to contribute. You teach so many people such amazing information. And I'm just so appreciative for everything that you do as well. So thank you.
Yeah, so well, if you aren't already following Devin, where can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you mentioned, I post rarely on Instagram, but I am there. My handle is point me to and then the underscore sign first class. And then if you happen to be female identifying physician, come join us in the Point Me to First Class for Women Physicians Facebook group. We love having new members there. You just want to learn about points and miles, or you're already, knee deep in this hobby, come and join us. And if you also want to learn more, but at your own pace, I have a podcast called Point Me to First Class. Try to cover a mix of beginner and more advanced topics, really walk people through kind of the fundamentals of earning and using points. So if you're a commuter or you like to listen to podcasts as you walk or you work or do whatever else, check out the podcast. There's a bunch of different ways that you can learn about things. And I just hope that you have a wonderful time.
Yeah, so every Monday you'll catch a new episode. Like we're always listening. Even my son, I think I sent you like a clip of him one day. He's sitting in the back of the car and like whistling the theme song to your podcast, and like even my kids are like knee deep into like Points and Miles at this point. Oh,
Oh my gosh, I love that. I will have to start doing more kid-focused episodes where I'm just talking to the young travelers because I just like to think, what changes in your life, when you've had exposure to travel from a very young age? I didn't have that, and I think just being able to learn and hear about these things, and it just normalizes stuff like kids traveling all over the world, right? And parents who travel, and I just think what better gift to give our children, so I will start talking directly to your kids from now on. I'll give them a shout out on the next episode.
they would love that. Right now they've only flown economy, but they're already like looking forward to flying their first business class flight, and they'll have you to thank for that. So
And you, more importantly, they will have you to thank, and I hope they make sure to do that.
Yeah, yeah, very good, very good. Well, thank you again for being here with me today to just let everyone know exactly what you do and how they can get involved in Points and Miles and how they can book their first next amazing experience, how they can get involved with the World of Hyatt, which is an amazing program. Make sure that you are following along on our podcast, that you're subscribed, that you're also following Devon on Point Me to First Class, and just really taking advantage of all the opportunities that are available to you and really not being afraid of having credit cards because it can be something that can be a little scary if you've never had a credit card or if you've been, taught these lessons early on that credit is bad and, it can incur a lot of debt. If you're using them responsibly and, you're using it to maximize and leverage the expenses that you already have, it can open up a world of opportunities that you didn't even know existed. And now you know they exist. So, just get out there, make the first step.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been such a pleasure. I always enjoy talking with you. So thank you for the invitation.
All right. We'll see you guys next time.